Hello, Professor. My name is Klein Graham, and this is my research assignment. I hope you like it. I did my research on the interconnected systems and how they impact the conflict currently taking place in Ukraine. And specifically, I try to dive more deep into, of course, how AI influences these interconnected systems. And not all of the information systems which comprise the interconnected systems use AI, but a lot of them do, and especially the most expensive ones like the fighter jets and stealth bombers and other specially designed aircraft and radars, aircraft with very expensive radars. Of course, all of these are very closely affiliated with AI. So, for this video, I will focus on the evaluation criteria as well as the results that I collected. So, for the evaluation criteria, we have a somewhat simple definition of what is an interconnected system, and that is an interconnected system. The asset that comprises an interconnected system will contain an information system, and that asset will also have the capacity to connect to another information system. So it's all about sharing data. It's all about collecting data points. And I also believe that this should be done in real time, because even if you are sharing data, if the data is a day old, this is not a true interconnected system. The data may still have some benefit to you, but especially on a changing landscape like the battlefield in Europe right now, day-old data or older is gonna not have so much value usually. So you can see here, for the next chart I just put X's instead of going through the other iterations, because they're all just end up in false if you don't have all trues. So the fact of the matter is, it must contain an information system that can connect to other information systems in order to form the interconnected system. And in my evaluation, based on my research, this asset should share data in real time. So that is the evaluation criteria that I use in this research. So here we have the evaluation criteria for a well-constructed interconnected system. There are many aspects of defense and offense which must go into account. So first off, we have the Air Force. Really could just call it air or air offense, but that may, debatably, you could also say it's this one, but debatably you could say the Air Force is the most important part of the interconnected system, a well-constructed one, because the idea of defining a well-constructed interconnected system is that a well-constructed system will be vastly ahead of a new interconnected system. And this is relevant to our discussion because early on in the conflict, neither of the two sides, Ukraine or Russia, had well-developed interconnected systems, but Ukraine had the Western interconnected systems data to be able to fall back on and rely on. So it was as if they had already adopted it and they have had to sink a lot of money into the infrastructure to adopt the interconnected systems, but really it's just receiving the technology that already encompasses this. Whereas Russia was very slow to adopt the interconnected systems. They were slow to adopt any changes. It was as if they were going to roll through Europe with strategies that will soon be a century old. So, and much of the equipment is over 50, 60, 70 years old. And so let's continue with the evaluation criteria. So the Air Force, the extension of the radar, that's going to be one of your most important aspects of your interconnected system. And I go into more specifics of how AI is impactful on that, such as the speed. AI can speed everything through a lot faster. AI is used in the decision making. We're using AI in the decision making in all our different fields. So of course the military, and it's helping, especially, a side like Ukraine with limited resources. Every side has limited resources, but especially a smaller country like Ukraine getting invaded by a larger country, they have to prioritize. And the artificial intelligence, when it helps with the decision making, it can tell them what is the best use of their resources. It can tell them who to target, when to target. And when they're defending, such as the ADs, the air defense, of course the civilians must be protected, as well as the civilian infrastructure and military infrastructure. So the artificial intelligence, if you just have human people trying to shoot down the incoming missiles and fire, that's going to be very difficult. But with artificial intelligence guiding the targeting, the missiles, even if it's hundreds of missiles coming in, they can be shot down by the air defense. So really, if both sides are using the interconnected systems, what we've seen right now is if both sides have all the ammo they want, then the defensive interconnected systems, such as the air defense, will win because of the early detection from things like the aircraft that helps them to be able to shoot down missiles before they arrive. So there's also the command centers. The command centers act as the brain of the neural network. They house all the most high-level infrastructure, and you could even say they house the brains of the neural network, so almost as if they house the brain of the AI itself. So they are very important to really all of these other parts of the interconnected systems are functioning through these command centers, and that is a very large focus of the Air Force right now, is to turn aircraft into mobile command centers. So then L for logistics. The logistics will always be very important, and the logistics must be a part of the interconnected systems to collect the data points, to understand the flaws as well as the dangers and the most efficient ways to conduct the logistics. BGs is boots on the ground. The actual soldiers on the ground, they have GoPro cameras, and all of these GoPro cameras are feeding data points to these neural networks, artificial intelligence, and when they feed all these data points, the artificial intelligence and the interconnected systems will help them to make decisions, and these decisions will be better. They will have more scientific. It won't be a guess. It'll be a more scientific approach to what they should be doing, and that will save lives. And the more lives they save, and the more equipment they save, that equipment stays in service, and as that equipment stays in service, it aids in the collection of even more data points. So it really propagates itself as these systems survive longer and have more age and more sustainability, then they can provide more data points. Although the data points are too much for a human to be able to sift through. So when we collect all this data, the AI is the one that's enabling us to collect the data, but in the interconnected systems, but it is also the only one that can analyze the data or splice it in a meaningful way to where it can be used. So another layer of its importance. And lastly, we have satellite. We know the satellites are very prevalent. It's hard to believe how many are able to be in orbit without hitting into each other. And so the satellite imagery, it makes pretty much everything go unseen, and it is also a very important part of the interconnected system. So, of course, to be a well-constructed, mature, interconnected system, you will need all of these things to be true. And one of the things I discuss in the conclusion, or slightly before the conclusion, is the drawbacks of interconnected systems, which is the cyber attack. And cyber attacks are very prevalent right now. There is information warfare in terms of trying to influence opinion, but there is also information warfare in terms of the equipment and the interconnected systems and gaining access to them. So when systems are analog or siloed, there's no vulnerability or backdoor for them to receive the cyber attack, which is safer, although they won't have as many capabilities. So that is the only, in my research, that is the main, most prevalent drawback of the interconnected systems, is the vulnerability to cyber attack, which leads to a necessity for a very large commitment of resources to identify who performs a cyber attack, to prevent the cyber attack, to do all of the things that come with allowing that vulnerability. So, well, it is a very, very big advantage. And another one of the things I talk about is Russia's lack of adoption early on, and if in the conclusion, and based on my research, had Russia adopted sooner the tactics of the interconnected systems, then they would have had a much higher chance of success early on. And that's what's been helping, well, depending on your definition of helping, but that's what's been extending the conflict. Oh, I didn't mean to go back to this. So I conducted a survey, and some people were not interested in answering the question, which is fine, but these were my results. I had anticipated that, based on my research, that more of the results would be that Ukraine had more of a reliance on artificial intelligence. Well, in the question I asked the West, but I think it's mostly just interpreted as Ukraine. And the results were that people feel like Russia has a larger reliance on artificial intelligence. So Perhaps that is another topic for future research, which is what is influencing the perception, and we can gather more data points to help with the sample size and statistical significance. But the future research would be to understand why that could be the perception. So the reason I thought the perception would be that potentially the West relied on artificial intelligence more is because of Russia's slow adoption of changing practices early on. And perhaps that is a topic for future research, is that actually the case? Because it would definitely seem to be, but perhaps there are some avenues that have not been discussed in the research.